Hey guys, welcome back. So now getting into Venom Island, to where like if there was words on the cover of this issue, it'd probably be like jalapeno, because like for whatever reason, I just imagine like Eddie just holding the Venom symbiote over this cliff, just like the Lion King. And maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just weird like that. But I gotta say, like getting into Venom Island, it surprised me because it took a turn for some deep cuts that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And because of that, I want to do a few comparisons as we talk about it. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so you can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping right in and picking up with like the aftermath of Absolute Carnage, of which at this point we've talked about the series in its entirety, in addition to a number of the tie-ins, but even with doing so, I still feel like there's a couple of tie-ins I want to go back and talk about. And if we do, I'll just add them to the Absolute Carnage playlist. But when we pick up here with Eddie, Dylan, and Sleeper, Eddie's getting a clean shave because he's heading to some type of meeting that's very important and he has to be very presentable for. But essentially Dylan's like, dude, you spending too much time in the mirror, you finna be late. To which the Venom symbiote agrees. But the only thing that's really causing Eddie to drag his feet here, if anything, it's really him just trying to take every moment and every opportunity to bond just a little closer with Dylan. But what we also find out at this point is like after all the madness with Absolute Carnage, for the moment Eddie and Dylan are staying with Normie's mother, Liz Allen, which is something that Peter kind of arranged with her being an old friend. And you can even tell like with this short period of time, Eddie's tried to open up more to Dylan and get Dylan comfortable enough to call him dad, but even still he notices Dylan is distant, but he's not necessarily aware that it's because of Dylan's secret, to which at this point Dylan hasn't gotten comfortable enough to share with Eddie because he's kind of frightened of it at the same time. And hopefully they'll have a moment where Dylan gets comfortable enough to be like, oh yeah, by the way dad, I'm a god, and Eddie will be like, oh you call me dad, wait what? Because I know there's gonna be like no way to drop that bomb lightly. But so when Eddie gets into the limo, like when the limo takes off, and I don't mean like jetting off fast, but I mean like literally taking off. But when this happens, it's almost pretty clear where he's heading to, because my only second guess would have been like to Wakanda to meet the agents of Wakanda. But with him heading to Avengers Mountain, it's pretty clear that he's here to have a meeting with the Avengers, which we also find out that Eddie didn't know, because when Eddie gets here, he just initially freaks out, because when he's greeted by Captain America, who's like, hey, why don't you follow me? To whom, by the way, like if you don't follow Chris Evans on Twitter, like you're missing out. Like get your life right, because it's good to get those alerts and see him sock old Donald Trump on the jaw every now and then. But for Eddie here, it's pretty crazy because he's freaking out because first he's greeted by Captain America, and then Captain America walks into a room with the rest of the Avengers, and Cap tells him like, no pressure Eddie, we're just here to talk. But with arriving here, Eddie initially freaks out. He's like, you guys want me to join the Avengers? And the Venom symbiote is like, Eddie, you're not breathing. You need to breathe. But even still, Cap assures him that he's brought here just to have a conversation. Maybe join, maybe not, but Eddie totally puts the cart in front of the horse. But so now to make things worse, in addition to the Venom symbiote talking to Eddie, all of a sudden we start to hear the Carnage symbiote. And this is mainly because when Cletus Cassidy had taken the Venom symbiote at the end of Absolute Carnage, this then set up for the same thing to be done when Eddie finally got the Venom symbiote back. And when this is happening, it is only the Carnage symbiote, because it tells Eddie that he killed Cletus, but not Carnage. And this is pretty wild because this is something that we never really see. And for the most part, it's because for the longest time, like the symbiosis between Cletus Cassidy and the Carnage symbiote, it had been so harmonized, so it was like when Cletus spoke, it wasn't even necessarily Cletus, but it was the two of them, him and his symbiote, which had become this new creature. But as far as I'm aware, like when it came down to the Carnage symbiote speaking to Cletus Cassidy, like those instances were like very rare, because there's only a couple that I'm aware of. And if you guys can think of some more, just let me know down in the comments, because for one of them, like in Amazing Spider-Man issue 362, we caught a bit of a conversation between Cletus and the Carnage symbiote. And at that point in time, it was more of a glimpse of us seeing the two of them just have a disagreement. And if I remember correctly, just the Carnage symbiote communicating to Cletus in the form of showing him memories. But even still, like the dialogue between them two was very rare. And the other time, if any, I'd have to say was like with minimal Carnage. I think like back when Carnage had went into the microverse, but even still, like those are the only two I can vaguely even put a finger on. But like I said, if you guys remember some more, like flood them down in the comments. But essentially with Eddie here having this 3-point conversation while he's here at Avengers Mountain, he's able to hold himself together well enough to keep his composure more or less and get out of there. But it is interesting that the Venom symbiote did recognize Thor, which really ties back into how the Venom series began. But also here the Venom symbiote is trying to tell Eddie that much like how Thor defeated Knull in the ancient times, that they'll need him again for what's to come. but with Eddie ending that meeting abruptly, to where with doing so, Cap gave him his card. He was like, hey, if you need anything, just let us know, no questions asked. Eddie took the card, went home, and he just storms past Dylan and Normie saying nothing. And as far as like Dylan and Normie who are playing video games at this time, you can tell Dylan knows that something's going on with Eddie, and Dylan's possibly noticing more than just how Eddie looks, but Normie don't even care. He's over there on the game like, man, Dylan's not paying attention, I'm about to wreck this dude. But in the case of Eddie, who stormed into the next room, the first thing he does, he goes for his pills like we had seen in the beginning of the Venom run, because these are the same pills that he had taken before, which would silence the Venom symbiote. But now, in this case, he's using them to silence the Carnage symbiote. And when he takes them, like, the Venom symbiote had begged him like not to do it, which was mainly from the painful memories of Eddie taking this medication or whatever before. But this time when Eddie takes him, he falls into this dream state to where he sees Knull taking Dylan and pulling Eddie even further away from his son. Which for Eddie, like that alone is like the worst part of this nightmare, let alone losing his son to Knull. But after this dream where Eddie wakes up, covered in blood with the words "God is coming" carved into his back, and it's at this moment he realizes more or less like, okay, I'm not okay. And he just knows that he has to get out of there and figure this thing out before he does something out of his control that just can't be undone. And like as much as he doesn't want to, this also means that he has to separate himself from Dylan and find somewhere isolated so he can handle this. And to do so, he calls in that favor from the card he got from Captain America, to where Cap had also mentioned like, if you need a favor, no questions asked. And it's here where Eddie calls in for that favor, which for him is a flight to Isla Huesos, the island of bones, which once again is another deep cut, because this takes us back to the Amazing Spider-Man issue 347, to where at a point in time, you know, where Venom was trying to kill Spider-Man, and back at that time he actually thought that he did. But back at the time in this issue, like what was called the Boneyard Hop, Venom had pretty much kidnapped Spider-Man and brought him to this island, and mainly because it had been abandoned since like the 1940s, to where at the time in the 40s there was this crazy mining incident and no one had returned there, with them believing for it to be cursed. But at the time with Eddie bringing Peter here, like it was low-key genius, because not only was Peter out of his element, but it also gave the Venom symbiote the opportunity to use its shape-shifting and disguises pretty much as a cloaking mechanism in ways that Peter hasn't seen before, which was pretty smart, with the Venom symbiote either jumping down in the water, disappearing, and then disguising himself with the water, then hitting Peter with a surprise attack. Like it was super clever, because in addition, Venom would then blend in with the terrain, to where on top of Peter not being familiar with the area and Venom not triggering Peter's spider sense, and so for that reason Peter had to improvise tremendously. But real quick, like back at this time, the way that this played out, Peter knew that the only way that he could stop Venom, or at least get him off his back, that would only come about at that time by giving Venom what he wanted, to where in this case it was Peter's death. And like back at the time, he took like an hour to make some preparations. He baited Venom out after seeing Eddie and the symbiote have a little campfire, and the campfire thing back at the time, that was pretty cool, because that's symbiote bonding. Pun very much intended. But with doing this and luring Venom out, Peter had made it appear that he had ran into an explosion by running into an area with loose gas, running with the torch, and at the time this had caused Venom to believe that he had successfully killed Spider-Man right here on Skull Island. And it's pretty crazy because you can tell Peter put a lot of thought and preparation into this. Like he had the skull or the skeleton wearing the Spider-Man outfit, to where if anything, that's probably the part that he didn't think through the most, because essentially he had to swim naked to like the nearest boat, and for him luckily there was a cruise going by, and I'm just gonna say that could have went very badly. But for Eddie back at the time, believing that he had killed Spider-Man, he had more or less just made Skull Island like his retirement home, to where at the time he was done with being Venom, which of course we know didn't last because Carnage came back, which then forced Peter to go back to the island and reveal to Eddie that he was still alive because he needed his help to stop Carnage. But essentially with Eddie coming back here, the Carnage symbiote knows that Eddie brought it here to kill it, and essentially the Carnage symbiote fights back, crashes the plane, and barely gets Eddie enough time to get out alive. But even with doing so, you have this situation to where the Carnage symbiote, it has separated Eddie from the Venom symbiote, and it's here we find out that not only with coming here, but even after they are here, the Venom symbiote is still trying to fight for Eddie against the Carnage symbiote, because essentially even with coming here, when Eddie made a decision to return to Skull Island, the Venom symbiote did its best to separate that knowledge from the Carnage symbiote, to which now, even at this point with the symbiote held hostage, it still continues to do in order to help Eddie to keep as many advantages as he can without the Carnage symbiote stealing memories from the Venom symbiote and using Eddie's memories against Eddie on this island. Which is pretty cool, man. Like, it really gives me like some Predator vibes. And really, when you think about it, like Boneyard Hop did the same thing. And like returning here to this island, it just really keeps the whole Predator vibe going on. It's just too bad they can't get to the chopper. Yeah. But so now, real quick, just want to give a shout out to all the Patreons who have been supporting this page and the one-man show. Like, thank you guys so much. Each and every contribution helps in a huge way, and I truly can't express how much I appreciate you guys. But yeah, just so you guys know, we'll definitely be getting back into Venom Island very soon because I am very much enjoying it. And I'll even confess, like initially I took my time getting into it, even though Donny Cates has been doing an amazing job at everything he touches. But when I first heard Venom Island, I was like, But when I discovered it was on the Island of Bones, I was like, oh. And then after reading the first couple issues, I'm like, okay, this is hot. And here we are. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. All right, later.